Hello friends, welcome back to the Create Your Shape podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, welcome to the Create Your Shape podcast. Jenny the Nutritionist is now on YouTube, so you can go check out and watch the video there as well. So today I'm talking and sharing the 12 ways to uplevel your workouts for ladies who are lifting weights and want to get the most out of them, want to be more efficient and effective, specifically for building muscle. We're talking about progressive overload training, ideal sets and reps, exercise order, training to failure, and so much more. So let's get into it. First, the problems that I see from the ladies that I work with and ladies that I speak with is they want to build muscle and they want to build their shapes, but they don't know the main components of a training program and what needs to be included in why. Or they have some of the components, like they're already lifting heavy, they're already on a progressive overload training program, but different aspects could be optimized to get more out of their training, or could just be more fine-tuned and custom and specific to the goals that they have. So I have had so many ladies over the past year ask me for custom programming. And it's not something that is currently included in Create Your Shape. And although I am a PT, I have experience in this area. I've been training myself for 15 years and I've been coaching others and training others. I have really spent a lot of my focus on the nutrition aspect because I do believe that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. However, when you're wanting to build your shape, especially build muscle, I know my ladies, I know you want to be the most efficient with your time. And now I've been asked enough. I see the need and I want to help. So right now, if you're listening to this live, January 2025, I am offering 10 spots for custom programming. So this is one-on-one training coaching, and 2 of the spots have already been claimed. So if you're listening to this live and this is something that you've been wanting, go to the link in the description of the show notes and you can get signed up there and get all the information you need, or just reach out to me if you have specific questions. This is for someone who is already lifting in some capacity, meaning you have weights in your hand in some capacity, but you need a program and you don't know where to go next, or you are more advanced and you can't find a program that suits your custom needs because you've kind of outgrown the not even vague, but the current programming that's out there because it's just not specific enough for the goals that you have. So that's really who this is for. And I won't get into all of the details of what's included and all that because you can see that at the link in the show notes. But now let's get into today's topic, because that is also what made me think about this. And in honor of this, I want to share the 12 ways to really up-level your training. And I'm going to share for each 12 things, I'm going to share what I mean and why. Because again, we're all about education here. So the first way to up-level your training is to be on a progressive overload training program. What that means is that your program is intentionally set for the week, and every week you are repeating that programming, but overloading your muscles. So that way the next week you are getting stronger in building muscle. So it's really intentional programming. It is not a bunch of variety. It is not like, oh, we're going to do this one day and we won't do it again for a couple of weeks. It is really intentional. And this just goes back to getting more out of the same amount of time. So if you want to make the best use of your time in your training program, the best way to do that is going to say, okay, if I want to build my glutes, I'm going to do a set of hip thrusts this week. Next week, I'm going to do that exact same set, and I should be able to get another rep or go heavier, right? That's how I know I'm progressing, and that's how I'm creating that stimulus to grow my glutes. So being on a progressive overload training program is the first one. The second way to up-level your training is to be intentional with the reps and sets that you are doing. So For specifically hypertrophy, meaning muscle growth and muscle size, that is the goal that I'm talking about here. That means you're going to be working in reps of 8 to 15. So every exercise that you do is, for the most part, going to be within that rep range. Now for sets, you are going to be doing anywhere between 2 and 4 working sets, meaning you've already completed your warm-up and now you're going into the working sets where you're lifting the heaviest. The reason why you want to be within that rep scheme is because that has been shown in the research to be past just gaining the strength and the neuro benefits of that 1 to 5 rep range. Well, it's past that, so you are getting the benefit of hypertrophy and building muscle. Beyond the 15 rep range, you really lose the intensity and being able to be that consistent and mentally focused for that long. Now, there may be some burnout sets where you do go that beyond that here and there, but generally, and for probably 90 to 99% of your training's going to be within that 8, maybe even 6, but that 8 to 15 rep range for those 2 to 4 sets. So why you would do 2 to 4 sets is generally if you are newer to training and you're figuring out your form, you're figuring out the different exercises, then 4 sets gives you more time to get practice under your belt. But as you get better with form and you progress in how much you're lifting and you progress in the intensity, then 4 sets generally is just too many sets, especially when you're doing 8 to 15 reps. It's just too many sets to really push yourself each set, and then you get diminishing returns as you get into that 4th set. Now, again, this isn't absolute. This might start trending over time, and this may vary depending on the specific muscle. But again, overall. Now, as you get more advanced, you may just be doing 2 really hard working sets, and if they're done well, then you wouldn't be able to do the 3rd set heavy enough or with enough intensity to get what you want out of it. So that's number 2, 8 to 15 reps in 2 to 4 sets. Number 3, remove wasted movements. So going back to this being focused on muscle building, you want to make sure everything that you're doing has the intent of building muscle. There are definitely other goals out there. You could be focused on performance for a sport or something like CrossFit. You could be focused on just strength, like I just mentioned, that generally is going to be lower rep ranges, less than 5. You could be focused on, let's say, just doing something enjoyable, right? Just having fun. That the goal may not be build muscle. I mean, here it generally is, but that's something else that the goal may be. Or your focus may be on endurance and you're going to do a marathon. So just keep in mind that those are different goals that would have different exercises in different movements that would be in the program to help support those goals. So you want to review your training to make sure you're removing any wasted movement that could be spent doing something else, or just removed to be more efficient with your time for the goal of building muscle. Next up, number 4, exercise choice alignment. Do the exercises that you're doing align to the shape that you want to build? So we've just talked about, do they align to building muscle? And now next, do they align to the specific muscle that you want to build? I remember when I first got into this, I really wanted to grow my glutes, and I was very focused on growing my glutes, but none of the exercises I was doing were really targeting and focusing on building my glutes. So I wasn't really setting myself up for success there. And I was, again, not being super efficient with my time because it wasn't very effective, right? So I had to reassess and redo my programming to change out the exercises I was doing to target the glutes more. This could be with a handful of different muscle groups, but something to review. And then along with that, are you doing enough working sets per week to tax them and stimulate them to the most that could be done within a training program to get the most out of it. Something else to consider within this. Okay, number 5, and the 5th way to up-level your training, tracking your weights. This is something that can be done in a notebook, in an app, or my personal favorite, and already one of my clients is using this way, is in the Notes app on your phone. Like, I just write down the date, the weights I'm using, and the reps in the rep that I got, and then I just every week, the next week I go back to it, I see exactly what I've done. And then there's a trend of the weights I'm using. This is so important because, again, going back to what is the most use of your time, if you want to get something done, you know that you need to progress in order to achieve the goal. How do you know if you're progressing if you're not tracking your weights, right? So you want to be tracking your weights every single workout. It's like part of the process. I actually find it very satisfying because it feels like a little game that I'm playing, which I'll talk about that in one of the upcoming ways. But make sure you're tracking your weights. All right, number 6, mind-muscle connection. So bringing in the mind-muscle connection just goes beyond form. So not only do you want to execute the exercise correctly and with good form, you want to make sure you're contracting the intended muscle. So think of all those fibers in your shoulder. Let's say your anterior delt, so the front part of your shoulder. So when you're going to do a shoulder press, right? Yes, you want to like set everything so you're like tight and not willy-nilly and moving around. But you don't want to be focused on squeezing your back to push up in that shoulder press. You want to be focused on squeezing that anterior delt and those muscle fibers and contracting those muscle fibers to drive up the weight. You don't want to be thinking about your hand and squeezing your hand as hard as you can. You want to think about your anterior delt, that front of your shoulder, and squeezing those muscles as hard as you can. This is going to create a better connection with those fibers, but ideally recruit more of those fibers to, again, put more of an emphasis on those fibers to then get more out of that same rep, out of that same set, out of that same day. You are getting more out of doing the same efficiency. Mind-muscle connection. All right, next up, number 7, weight selection. So you are going to choose weights based on what you did last week with the goal to improve them this week. You are not going to choose weights based on how you feel. This was a big game changer for me. Huge. And it took me some time, honestly, to get there. But once I did, absolute game changer. And I feel like every single workout I do, I know it's a good use of my time. So again, if you want to build muscle, you have to create a stimulus to do that. That stimulus is you lifting heavier weights than you're able to do last week. So you do this by going into however you tracked it last week. For me, it's going into the notes section of my phone, looking up what did I do last week, and I'm either going to get one more rep or I'm going to go up in weights. So that's a double progression, but either I'm getting one more rep or I'm going up in weights. I'm not deciding based on how I'm feeling what I'm going to go for. Whether I feel happy, sad, in a bad mood, it doesn't matter. Like after I record this episode, I'm going to the gym a little later than normal. I know it's going to start getting dark. I'm not going to want to be there, but it doesn't matter. I'm still going to progress because how I feel doesn't matter. It's what's on the notes section in my app that is telling me to progress. So, for example, if I did 100 pounds last week on the leg press for 10 reps, in my rep range, it says get 10 to 12, I know that I need to do 100 pounds and I need to get 11 this week because last week I got 10. So now I need to get 11 this week. So that's one way to do it. It kind of depends on your program and how advanced you are, but I do think this is the best way. And another way that this may look is if I got 100 pounds last week for 10 reps, then I need to get 105 pounds this week for 10 reps, right? So again, choosing the weight selection based on what you did last week, not on your feelings. Number 8, go in with the intent to perform. So you are an athlete. You have the goal of building muscle. It is maybe not like an athlete who has the goal of winning the game, but you still are an athlete because you're using your body to achieve a goal, a set goal that you have out. So you want to go into your training session with this intent. It's a different mindset. I almost think of it like you're going into the training session with like you're going into a competition, right? So the competition is against myself, and I know the goal, going back to what I just shared, the goal is to get 11 reps at 100 pounds. I already know that, right? I could look up that hours ahead in time before I even go to the gym. I know that's the goal for the day, and I am competing. So I'm going to approach the gym like I'm going into a competition, right? It makes it so much fun, especially if you're competitive, which I know if you're listening to this, you are. And it makes it feel like your training session is like very purposeful. And it is. So that is how you would approach going into the gym. Like you're treating it like you are an athlete and you're going in to perform. So you're mentally focused on performing. You're not mentally focused on like, okay, I'm just going to get in and just kind of like check the box and I'll do this. I'll do a little bit of that. And like, I don't know what I'm doing today. Like that energy is no longer. Okay. Again, going back to the main focus, which is how can we get more out of this training session? How can we make it more efficient, more effective, and reach your goals of building muscle? And make it more fun. This definitely makes it more fun. Number 9, require rest. Essentially what this means is that your working set is done at an intensity that afterwards you need a break. And typically what that feels like is it feels like the pump where the blood has been rushed to your muscle and it is being like fluids, blood, nutrients being rushed to that muscle. So it feels like that area is kind of like expanding and it feels like, I describe it as tingly, like that's the pump, right? You have that feeling. If someone was to say, okay, go again right now, you'd be like, whoa. I need this muscle to recover first, or I need my breath to recover first. I need to be able to like get back to baseline and then I can go again to get the most out of that next set. Again, because we're doing each set with intention. So if you're an athlete, you would be like, wait, give me another second to rest so that I can perform my best this next time. So you want to be training hard enough where you require that rest and then you take it. Typically, you're going to rest between 90 seconds to 3-ish minutes, maybe even up to 4 minutes. But depending on how much time, again, you have to train within your training program. But typically, in maybe even some 60 seconds, but I typically see around 90 seconds to 2 minutes is going to be generally the rest needed or the rest you should take. I would time yourself because if you're like me, you're going to be really antsy and you're going to want to go. I would time yourself, do it on your phone or clock or watch to make sure that you're getting an adequate rest in between. And generally you want to get to a point where you feel like, oh wait, I need to rest, because then you know you're really getting the most out of that, the sets before. Okay, just a few more. Number 10, train to failure. This one's a little controversial. However, I am a strong believer in training to failure, especially for my audience and if you're listening to this. So, training to failure means that you are performing an exercise until you cannot contract that muscle to properly execute that exercise. For example, going back to the shoulder presses, if you're contracting mainly, let's say it feels like 99% you're contracting that shoulder or that front of the shoulder, the anterior delt, and you get to a point where you're contracting that muscle and you're squeezing, and the weight's not going anywhere because your muscle's tapped out. It's like, okay, we're done. We're shutting off now. We cannot physically lift this anymore. That is failure. What failure doesn't mean is that you're then like squirming and trying to like push the weight up over your head, and then you're like, now you've got like scoliosis in your back because you're all twisted, and then you're like pressing down with your leg. That's not the failure I'm talking about. That can cause injury, right? And this is where training failure gets a bad rep. I also typically am not talking about training to failure in performance exercises or strength exercises like deadlifts and clean and jerks and things that a lot of times you can get hurt if you like more easily. So those things, there are some things that I would say, doesn't make sense to train to failure in that. But for most exercises, training to failure makes sense, especially when you do it with the intent that I just talked about of squeezing those muscle fibers. And that is because if we don't train to failure and they say, oh, just go until it's hard, or go until, let's call it 3 reps until failure. You don't know what that means unless you've gone to failure. And it takes, I would say, years to get so comfortable and familiar with what failure actually is to then be able to decide what 3 reps shy of failure would be. So I don't think it makes sense to do less than that because you don't even know what failure is. And I'm saying this from experience. I currently feel like I feel like if I trained right now 3 reps to failure, I'd be doing myself a disservice because I don't even feel that savvy with failure yet. And I've been doing it for a long time, right? So training to failure, I would introduce it and start playing around with it. The first thing to do if you're like, I don't really know what training to failure feels like, the first thing to do is for an exercise, let's say lateral raises. You're going to pick a weight that you think you could do that the rep scheme for. So let's say it's 2 sets of 10. You go in there, you choose the weights, and you're like, I think I can do that with like 7 pounds. Then you start lifting. You don't stop lifting until you fail. That'll tell you how many reps you can really do. Because when I did that, I was like, I just did 16 reps until I failed. So if you're not even, like I wasn't even touching a stimulus in order to grow, because if I just stopped at 10 and be like, yep, okay, I did it, I wouldn't be making progress, right? So that's a good way to test it here. Okay, train to failure, that's number 10. Number 11, exercise order of your training program. When it comes to specific goals, and if you have a primary muscle group that you want to grow, it is ideal to try to stack that muscle group towards the front of your training program because that's going to get the greatest stimulus, the most effort, the biggest intensity. So for example, right now, mine is glutes, and my glute focused exercises are at the beginning of my training program because that is what I want to focus on most. So typically the ladies that I work with will have 1 to 3 primary muscle groups that they're really focused on per training program. So you'd want to intentionally put those first when you're reviewing an overall program. In the last one, last but not least, there is so much more when this comes from, but I feel like these are the top ones that I see a lot, and we'll cut it off at 12. But this one I cannot not say because it comes down to nutrition. Eat enough and carb and protein load your training. Meaning, if you want to build muscle, you need enough nutrients to do that. So you want to make sure that you're eating adequate calories. So most of my ladies who are lifting and training hard, if you're lifting weights, generally I see that you're going to be burning 1,800 calories or more. And if you're lifting heavy, you're going to be burning 2,000 calories per day. So make sure that you're getting at least that or more, again, custom to you, to have enough nutrients, having those building blocks to then recover and repair the muscles to grow back bigger and stronger. Another way to fine tune that is to carb and protein load before and after your training to help just shuttle that fuel and utilize that fuel in the most optimal way. So there you have it. Those are the 12 ways to up-level your workout specifically for ladies who lift weights. And if you're listening to this live and want to take advantage of one of those spots where I'm providing you one-on-one coaching and a custom program, then go to the link in the show notes to get signed up and reach out to me for any questions. This will be only available and open for January 2025 as of now. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you next week on the Create Your Shape podcast.